Art mirrors the human condition.
We uncover its hidden patterns,
Experience human creativity.
elevated by digital analysis.
Welcome to the Academy.
Join the journey.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into an absolute titan of modern cinema. And let me tell you, it is a terrifying, fascinating descent into the human psyche. We're unpacking Francis Ford Coppola's 1979 masterpiece, Apocalypse Now. This film is just a phenomenal case study. It bridges these profound literary roots with truly groundbreaking visual storytelling. We're going to break down its structure, its famously chaotic history, and the deep philosophical dimensions that make it completely unforgettable. We train young men to drop fire on people, but their commanders won't allow them to write fuck on their airplanes because it's obscene. Wow. That shocking realization from Colonel Kurtz instantly sets the intense moral tone for our whole exploration today. I mean, it perfectly encapsulates the film's brutal critique of Western civilization's moral justifications for war. It just points out the absolute devastating absurdity of military bureaucracy. And honestly, it serves as the perfect jumping-off point for our journey. All right, let's jump into part 1, the mission and the myth, the surface briefing. Let's get grounded in the story. So picture this. It's the height of the Vietnam War. We follow Captain Benjamin L. Willard, a deeply traumatized U.S. Army Special Ops officer who's handed this surreal, highly classified mission. He has to travel up the fictional Nung River, cross over into neutral Cambodia, and locate a man named Colonel Walter E. Kurtz. Kurtz is a once-decorated Green Beret who is completely detached from traditional military logic. He's gone totally rogue. He now commands a legion of native Montagnard troops and renegade Americans who literally worship him as a demigod. Your mission is to find him and assassinate him. Now, you might be surprised to hear this, but the core journey here actually isn't an original concept. Coppola masterfully transplanted Joseph Conrad's 1899 novella, Heart of Darkness, right onto the screen. He took that framework, navigating a 19th century uncharted African river to find an ivory trader, and mapped it flawlessly onto a 20th century war zone to find a rogue special forces colonel. The core framework remains exactly the same, but the context shifts seamlessly to the modern American military experience. Moving on to Section 2, A Production in Chaos, the real-life jungle. Okay, the making of this movie is literally almost as famous as the film itself. Filmed in the Philippines, the production was plagued by what you can only call biblical disasters. First off, a massive typhoon absolutely destroyed the enormous, incredibly expensive sets. Then, out of nowhere, the lead actor, Martin Sheen, suffers a near-fatal heart attack right there on location. And then, when Marlon Brando finally arrived to play the pivotal role of Kurtz, he showed up massively overweight and completely unprepared. I mean, the sheer absurdity of these production nightmares. It forced Coppola to rewrite the ending on the fly, which, ironically, perfectly mirrored the chaotic, uncontrollable environment of the story they were trying to tell. You're probably wondering, how on earth did a movie even survive that level of total chaos? Well, to understand that, we have to look at when it was made. Released in 1979, Apocalypse Now arrived at the tail end of the new Hollywood era. This was a super brief, totally unique period in cinema where visionary directors were handed massive studio budgets and given almost complete creative control. Emerging from this chaotic era with basically all the money and freedom in the world, the film stands as the definitive, unflinching cinematic statement on the American psychological experience in Vietnam. Which brings us to Section 3, Sounds and Shadows, the sensory overload. This film didn't just push storytelling boundaries, it absolutely revolutionized cinematic audio. It was one of the very first movies to ever utilize a modern surround sound mix, specifically the Dolby Stereo 70mm 6-track. And the sound design literally weaponizes music and noise. The most famous example of this, the horrific helicopter assault sequence, which is perfectly choreographed to Richard Wagner's classical masterpiece, Ride of the Valkyries. It brilliantly contrasts the high art grandeur of European classical music with the mechanized, brutal slaughter of modern warfare. It just completely highlights the surreal absurdity of the conflict. And visually, the film relies heavily on chiaroscuro. That's the intense, Baroque contrast of light and shadow. But the cinematographer, Vittorio Storaro, didn't just use this to make the film look pretty. Actually, scratch that, it does look incredible, but he really weaponized the lighting as a narrative tool to map a visual descent into the subconscious. As Willard gets closer and closer to Kurtz, the lighting becomes increasingly fragmented and extreme. And that brings us to this incredible visual descent into surrealism. Realism is just completely abandoned the further the boat travels upriver. By the time Willard reaches the Dulung Bridge, which serves as the very last outpost of the U.S. Army, the logic of the real world is entirely gone. There's no commanding officer present, soldiers are just firing wildly into the pitch-black darkness, and the entire environment is lit by these crazy, psychedelic, carnival-like flares. The physical journey up the river has fully transformed into a pure psychological nightmare. Finally, we reach Section 4, the heart of darkness, the depths of the psyche. So, what is this all really about? At the very core of this story is the profound philosophical concept of the duality of man. It's that eternal battle between our civilized, polite exterior and our primal, savage nature. Kurtz represents the terrifying reality of what happens when a highly educated, sophisticated mind completely sheds the fragile moral constructs of society. He embraces absolute, uninhibited brutality to achieve his goals. He's the ultimate reflection of Willard's own internal descent into darkness. And remember how I mentioned earlier that Marlon Brando showed up totally unprepared and overweight? Well, this brilliantly illustrates how a production disaster was turned into a cinematic triumph. Because of that, Coppola rewrote the ending on the fly and decided to film Brando almost entirely in shadow. In that final compound, Kurtz is never fully illuminated. His face is carved out of pitch-black shadows. What started simply as a practical way to hide an actor's weight became the absolutely perfect visual representation of his fractured mind and his intense moral ambiguity.
Which brings us right to the end of the journey, and to Kurtz's final, iconic words. The horror, the horror. Just 4 words, but they encapsulate the ultimate realization of the human condition in a state of nature. It's this chilling recognition of the infinite capacity for evil that exists within every single human being once the guardrails of civilization are completely stripped away. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. When the fragile guardrails of modern civilization are stripped away, what remains of our civilized exterior against the primal nature within us all? Apocalypse Now doesn't just show us a war, it shows us ourselves, reflected right back at us in the darkest waters of the jungle. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey upriver, and I really hope this gives you a completely new lens through which to view this absolute masterpiece of cinema.
Welcome to the Digital Academy of Enriching Arts. Here, we cross the boundaries of time to explore the greatest triumphs of human creativity. But to keep this journey going, we need a little help from you.
If you enjoy diving deep into the masterpieces of literature and philosophy, be sure to hit that like button. It helps us bring these timeless stories to more people. To ensure you never miss our latest explorations into the breathtaking worlds of classical music and fine art, hit subscribe and ring the bell. And if you want to help us build a community of true art lovers, share this channel with your friends. The Academy is always accepting new students.